Long before Marvel acquired total box office domination of the comic book genre, Hollywood was making superhero movies. And before gaining 30 pounds of muscle and donning a unitard was the ticket to superstardom that is today, tons of very well-known Hollywood actors tried their hands at superheroes and supervillains, many of whom we had totally forgotten about. Today, we're taking a look back at a handful of famous actors and the superheroes we completely forgot they played. Ryan Reynolds hasn't always had an easy time trying to break into the superhero genre. Before he achieved near universal acclaim for his role as the fourth wall-breaking anti-hero Deadpool, he first appeared as a very different Wade Wilson in the much-loathed X-Men Origins Wolverine. And then of course there was Green Lantern, but in between the two, he starred as a far less famous superhero in the indie movie Paperman. In the film, he stars as Captain Excellent, the childhood imaginary friend to the now very grown-up Richard, played by Jeff Daniels. The movie also stars Lisa Kudrow, Kieran Culkin, and Emma Stone, only 2 years after her big Superbad break. While Captain Excellent doesn't really have many powers to display aside from disappearing and reappearing at will in Richard's mind, the bleach blonde Reynolds injects the character with the same blend of sarcasm, humor, and heart that would eventually lead him into his most beloved role yet as Deadpool. It's clear to see, even in this quirky little movie, that he has always had the super gene in him, even if it's a whole lot filthier and a little less heroic than some of the more traditional good guys out there. Will Smith has played just about every kind of character imaginable in his long and distinguished career on the big screen, from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to a bad boy cop, an alien hunter in Men in Black, a down but determined father in The Pursuit of Happiness, to a genie and everything in between. Smith has never shied away from taking on roles that break the mold, which is why we always kick ourselves for forgetting one of our favorite Will Smith roles, Hancock. While there have always been heroes and villains in the superhero genre, Hancock was one of the first times we got to see someone who wasn't exactly a hero, even if he did have all the powers. It was a great movie, and one that actually took the time to answer the question that we always have about the insane amounts of property damage that goes on in superhero movies. How much did that cost? Smith is awesome as Hancock, a superpowered vigilante with a drinking problem who needs the help of a public relations expert to help him turn his image around. With Jason Bateman and Charlize Theron co-starring, Hancock is a movie that we never want to forget about again. After 2005's Sin City blew the minds of moviegoers everywhere and warped our image of Elijah Wood for the rest of time, The World was director Frank Miller's oyster. Miller, the co-director and creator of the graphic novel in which the movie was based, brought a kind of style to the screen that no one had ever seen before. It was a huge sensation, and a few years later, he would follow the success of Sin City with another movie in his signature style, The Spirit. If you don't remember The Spirit, don't feel too bad. Not many do. Unfortunately, critics and fans didn't take to this movie the same way they had Sin City, and it was neither a critical or box office hit. And yet, we couldn't leave it off of this list because the cast is absolutely insane, and we had completely forgotten that any of these people were in it. Gabriel Macht takes on his only superpowered role to date as the Spirit himself, a back-from-the-dead detective turned vigilante. Alongside him is Scarlett Johansson as the femme fatale Silken Floss, Eva Mendes as his love interest Sans Serif, and none other than Samuel L. Jackson playing the Spirit's rival, Octopus. Some superhero movies don't quite fit the mold of a traditional comic book adaptation. They're not glossy, shiny, and filled with good defeating evil and a clear victory for the good guys. And because they don't have the same kind of overall commercial appeal, they tend to fall to the wayside in the conversation about the genre. But this is a real shame, because some of the best movies in the super genre have been unlike others. And for us, one of the best examples of that is Dredd. Dredd is a super grimy, very violent, and completely unheroic superhero movie from 2012. And under the helmet in the title role is Karl Urban, who you probably know these days from his other super grimy and very violent project, The Boys. But before he was Butcher, he was Judge Dredd, a futuristic cop in a very dystopian version of Earth, given the task of taking down a drug-peddling gang and their leader Mama, played by none other than Lena Headey herself. While some superheroes are big and flashy and beloved by millions, others are not. And that's where the movie Defendor comes in. Starring Woody Harrelson, Defendor was a tiny Canadian movie that deserved so much more love than it got upon release. The film follows Harrelson's Arthur Poppington, a man who is completely convinced that the world is just like the old comics and stories that his grandfather used to read to him as a child. Because of this, he believes that he is a superhero called the Defendor, and every night he dresses up and hits the streets to fight crime himself and to search for his mysterious nemesis, Captain Industry, who he believes is responsible for the death of his mother. Along the way, he meets a young woman named Angel, played by Kat Dennings, and the two form an unlikely friendship. It is a funny, sweet, sad, and sometimes very dark movie about some very un-superheroes. And it is definitely one of Woody Harrelson's best performances, even if no one really remembers it. When most of us think of Rainn Wilson, we undoubtedly jump right to his most famous and beloved role yet, The Office's Dwight Schrute. And when we think of James Gunn, we think of the man who brought us one of the freshest takes on the superhero genre of recent years, Guardians of the Galaxy. But when you put together Rainn Wilson and James Gunn and jump back to the year 2011, we get Super. And while most of us haven't thought about this movie since it first came out, we think it's time to remember that it exists and give it a rewatch. However, be warned, from the trailer, it may look like the Juno of superhero movies and feature Ellen Page to boot, but Juno, this movie is not. Super is a very low-budget and super subversive take on the masked vigilante movie, but unlike Defendor, this one is not afraid to get gross. And dark. And violent. Oh, and hilarious. Rainn Wilson stars as Crimson Bolt, the unlikely hero at the center of the film, a man whose wife has left him for a very smarmy Kevin Bacon, and who creates a superhero alter ego in order to get her back. With Ellen Page as his maniac sidekick, things quickly go awry. Even though it might not be as big as Guardians of the Galaxy, Crimson Bolt's catchphrase, "Shut up, crime," deserves to go down in history. Ben Stiller is one of those actors who have proven that not only can he be absolutely hilarious, but he can also get serious with the best of them. And he is known for some seriously iconic performances, from Zoolander to Dodgeball to Tropic Thunder, Meet the Parents, There's Something About Mary, Night at the Museum, and so on and on and on. Stiller has been the star of so many hit movies that it's hard to remember them all. And while you might think that the one thing he hasn't done is play a superhero, well, we are here to remind you about a very weird, very 90s movie called Mystery Men. Mystery Men came out in 1999, and even though it is completely goofy and over the top, it was actually pretty ahead of its time in the way it talked about superheroes as for-profit corporate vehicles, and for how it poked fun at the self-seriousness of the genre. It also features a perfect cast for the time, with Janine Garofalo, Hank Azaria, and Greg Kinnear all starring alongside Stiller. While a lot of movies on this list aren't exactly for kids, there is one that is definitely fun for the whole family, and that is Sky High. It came out right after Christopher Nolan single-handedly upended the superhero genre with his game-changing Batman Begins, and it could not be more polar opposite. Sky High takes place in a world where superheroes walk among us, and so do their kids. In the titular high school for the children of heroes called Sky High, kids are separated into heroes and sidekicks. The story follows Will, the son of two very famous heroes, as he struggles to overcome being placed in the sidekick category because he hasn't developed any superpowers. The real surprise here is that his dad, the beloved hero Commander, is played by none other than Kurt Russell. Russell isn't really an actor who is known for taking on lighter roles in family-oriented films. Instead, he has played all kinds of tough guys in his day, but he really gets the chance to show off his softer side in Sky High as a loving father who just wants the best for his son. Okay, for this entry, we have a very deep cut, and without a doubt one of the weirdest movies on this list, or any list. When we think of Alec Baldwin, we definitely don't think superhero. And yet, ladies and gentlemen, we present to you The Shadow. Filmed in 1994, but set just after World War I, The Shadow follows Baldwin's Lamont Cranston, a man who rather inexplicably became an international warlord and opium king with a very funky wig in Tibet. I know, stay with us. After years of living this way, Cranston is then abducted by the servants of a holy man named Tulku, who knows who Cranston really is. A whole thing with a sentient dagger happens, and Cranston winds up spending the next 7 years training with Tulku, learning hypnosis, mind reading, and a way to move around unseen, appearing only as the Shadow. And we're just getting started. He then returns to New York City and begins tormenting the criminal underworld by night with his new abilities. Later, a man named Shiwan Khan, a descendant of Genghis Khan, wakes up in a sarcophagus and makes his way to the Big Apple to finish the work that his ancestor started. but this time with an atomic bomb. Hey, what more do you want with the movie? We can't believe that no one is talking about the Shadow anymore. But hey, you know what? It's probably only a matter of time before we get a CW reboot. Chris Evans is another actor who had superhero written all over him from day one, and while he eventually found his place as the perfect Captain America, he tried on a couple of super suits before he found the one that fit just right. Of course, most people remember him as the boyish Human Torch in the first ill-fated Fantastic Four movie in 2005, but there is another one in which he played a superhuman that many of us have never even heard of. We're talking about a very ambitious but very small indie movie. It's called Push. In it, he plays Nick, a man known as a mover with telekinetic abilities which he uses to push objects around him. But his life is quickly thrown upside down when he is joined by Dakota Fanning's Cassie, a watcher who has the ability to see in the future. The two embark on a quest to save Nick's ex-girlfriend from a series of similarly superpowered enemies. Even though it didn't end up a huge box office smash or with a sequel as it intended, it's still really fun to see a pre-cap Chris Evans proving once again that he has the charm and heart to take up the shield. Well, we don't know about you, but we have some movies to watch. What did you think of these not-so-famous superhero performances? Did we miss any of your forgotten favorites? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe to keep up to date with the latest from ScreenRant. See ya!